Yeah, so I think I'll probably just like monologue it for a while, and then at some point I'll get sick of hearing myself. Goes off. I'll get sick of hearing myself talk, and you guys might start to get sick of it too, and I'll try to tap into that by taking it with expressions, and then we'll just have questions and whatever else comes up. Maybe we'll all take off our clothes or something like that. Yeah, so the topic, I don't know where that came from, really. The topic is sacred economics, which that was the book I wrote a few years ago, and it's still part of the mix, although I have a new book that really isn't about economics at all in an obvious sense. But I still speak on sacred economics, and when David was introducing, he talked about our kind of workshop yesterday, and about, he mentioned things like not blaming, and it's like, so what were we doing in that workshop? It sounds like something kind of spiritual or something like that, and for many people that already sets off a few warning bells, a few red flags, because maybe some of you think that spirituality is kind of this escape from practicality, where we all are, sitting on our cushions, chanting Om while the world burns, imagining that changing our thoughts are going to automatically, magically change the world. And so a lot of people, myself included, are very wary of anything that calls itself spiritual or sacred. So I want to say that I'm using the sense sacred, I'm using sacred in a very different way. It's not about some separate non-material realm. It's not about becoming so pure that you no longer use money and you distance yourself from that messy world of commerce and the messy world of the flesh. Like that's for, lower sorts, but we spiritually advanced people, maybe we're not entirely separate from the world of money, but we don't really, go there as much as possible. It's kind of distasteful. And that's really not what it's about. In fact, that mindset of purity, of rising above, that's part of what I'm going to call the old story. That says that the destiny of humanity is to rise above nature. And the destiny of the individual is to rise above the body, rise above desire, rise above pleasure into some ethereal realm, some higher realm. Like, what's a bit about higher? Anyway, like, why are high vibrations good and low vibrations bad? Why, like, really? Like, what's wrong with a rock? Why is a bassoon not as good as a flute? Like, what's wrong with, why do we have this, why does high equal good and low equal bad? Why does superior mean better than? Why? What's so good about high? And this has ancient roots going back thousands of years to the beginnings of social hierarchies, where the low people in the hierarchy were the ones who worked in the soil. And the priests and the king were the higher people, and their feet were not allowed to touch the ground. So it was very literal, this rising above. And since then, we've kind of translated that into the pursuit, of the realm of the mind, or trying to become rational or spiritual, and not fleshly, not material. So I'm just saying, this is about a different conception of the sacred, where sacredness is a function of the uniqueness and connectedness of a thing. So when you take something away from its relationships and you make it standard, it doesn't really seem sacred anymore, like a commodity that you buy at the store. Each one is just like every other one, and it has no story behind it, compared to the tea set that your grandmother gave you that has chips, and each chip is associated with a childhood memory. Like, that's a sacred object. And we once, our civilization has increasingly, for a long time, seen the world as something not sacred. It's not, we see nature as resources, as a source of commodities, and not as a unique, or not, we don't see every tree and every plant and every river and every lake and every mountain as a unique individual that's sacred, that's worthy in its own right, that has the qualities of a self, of a being. It's just a bunch of stuff out there. And that's part of what I'm calling the old story. So sacred economics is based on an understanding that we are transitioning to a new story that no longer sees nature in that way, and no longer sees ourselves as separate from the world, separate from each other, no longer seeks to rise above and to be detached from material reality, but that seeks instead to recover our lost connections, our lost beingness, our lost place in the world, the sense of being at home in the universe, of being a part of a living universe, and not these alienated, separate selves in a universe of other. So it has deep roots, this. And I'm not, but it's not just philosophical. So I say, okay, what from this understanding of an interconnected self in a living universe, a living planet, from this, what would an economy look like? What would systems look like? And what would our economic behavior look like? What would it be like to be human in this world? So I translated it into some, kind of systems level thinking, as well as personal, relational thinking as well. And I think that these questions are unavoidable. I think a lot of people understand that the crisis that our society faces isn't going to be solved by kind of technocratic tinkering, but that the change that has to happen goes all the way to the bottom, all the way to the individual, all the way to parts of ourselves that have been lost, that everything's changing, including who we are and how we see the world, how we know, everything. I guess that maybe provokes some discomfort sometimes. We want to just not go there sometimes and say, well, let's be practical instead. Let's not talk about these things that we've kind of pushed off into the spiritual realm. Let's not look within ourselves. Let's talk about social change. Let's talk about capitalism. Let's talk about money systems. Let's talk about internalization of external costs. Let's talk about reforming the tax system. Let's talk about stuff outside ourselves. The thing is, all of this stuff outside ourselves colonizes ourselves too, inhabits us. And we look at the world through the eyes of money as we know it. It programs us in so many ways. Acting from that programming, we're not likely to create real change. I was just, but this discomfort, I was supposed to speak at the University of Oslo last week. And I had my tickets and everything, and then at the last minute they canceled it because it had the word sacred in the talk title, and that has no place at the university. And so we moved the event off-grid. But I understand where they're coming from. And it's recognizing this kind of artificial spirit matter split, and thinking that I must be talking about religion or something else not practical. But there's something else too. I think that talk of the sacred, in the sense that I mean it, is scary. In the sense of the qualities of a self being outside of ourselves too, and not just human beings. The sense of a kind of magic in the world, a livingness in everything, in the hills. I get that sense in Scotland, like this is ancient land, and this land knows human beings and knows the people here, and these hills, these mountains, these what are they called? Firths, bays, firths. Like they have a beingness, They have a selfness. Like I get the feeling really strongly here. Is that just my imagination? Is that just an anthropomorphic projection of human qualities onto what's really just a jumble of protons, neutrons, and electrons? It's just water, just minerals, reducible to 92 elements, which are reducible to actually several hundred fundamental particles, but we're not going to go there. This reductionist program is running into a catastrophe with the explosion of supposedly fundamental particles. But that's a whole other topic that I could go, but I'm not going to go into any more than I have. So is this just an anthropomorphic projection, assigning the qualities of self onto nature? When really it's just a bunch of stuff out there, and therefore our problems of our civilization can be solved by more effective engineering of this inert, generic, random, impersonal other outside of ourselves. Is that how it is? That's the story that we've grown up in. And that story conflicts with what we know. With what we know. You can't look at those landscapes and not feel the stirring of knowledge. That this is a being out here. But that knowledge contradicts our beliefs, myself included. I could tell you that I believe that the hills are alive, that they have not only living quality, but also intelligence, consciousness, purpose, and desires. I could tell you I believe that. And I do partly believe it. But there's part of me that doesn't believe it. And there's part of me, as I was saying, that's scared to believe it. There's part of me that hurts when I even go there. Because this belief that I had as a child, every child knows it, was crushed brutally and repeatedly until I came to accept a dead, purposeless universe. And when something reawakens that, part of me is afraid it's going to get crushed again. And to avoid that pain, I just retreat a little bit into cynicism. Sometimes. And I think many people, especially the skeptics, retreat very deeply into the cynicism. But really, they want to believe as well. Because that knowledge is inextinguishable. It's part of who we are. So, I guess, since this is billed as sacred economics, I should go back to that a bit. So the question then is, what would an economy and a money system and our economic behavior look like in a world where we accept the beingness of all life and all matter? What would an economy look like that is aligned with our newfound understanding of the sacredness of nature? Because what's sacred to our society is changing. A couple generations ago, what was sacred to our society was growth, progress, the conquest of nature, You could say, 2 generations ago, you could say the conquest of nature without a shred of irony. People would be like, yeah. Like, people would people would affirm that. You know? It was not something that you would disparage. That was good. If you contributed to the conquest of nature, you were a hero. If you developed a way to cut down trees faster, you know, to mine coal faster, to do things more efficiently, to make better explosives, you know, I mean, you were a hero if you were contributing to this program. Every young person wanted to be a nuclear, well, then it was an atomic scientist, you know, or an engineer or something like that. And today, we no longer worship the paradigm of, or this kind of destiny of endless growth, of expanding, of becoming the lords and masters of nature, the lords and possessors of nature. No longer. Now, like the really dynamic, intelligent, idealistic young people, they don't want to be atomic engineers anymore. They want to go into permaculture. You know, they want to go into restorative justice. You know, they want to go into ecosystem restoration. They want to save the sea turtles. You know, they want to. What is sacred to us is changing. Unfortunately, we live among structures that are built on what was sacred to us 2 generations ago. For example, the money system. The money system does not reward you very much, usually, for pursuing permaculture, restorative justice, hospice care for the dying, ecosystem restoration, saving the forests, and so forth. The economic system rewards you for the opposite. So I ask, why? You know, if you save a forest, no one pays you. If you cut it down and build strip malls, then you make a lot of money. Money is a social agreement. You know, what is money, ultimately? On the physical level, it's nothing. Almost nothing. It's this haze of electrons, mostly. So something paper, but most 97% of money isn't even paper. You know, it's just little bits in computers. Physically, it's almost nothing. But it has tremendous power because of our agreements about what those symbols mean. So basically, we as a society have agreed to reward those things that are tearing up the planet and making people miserable all around the world, and not rewarding the things that we desperately need, socially and environmentally. But it's an agreement, and agreements can be changed. But this agreement doesn't stand in isolation from our larger stories and mythologies. For example, the agreement we call money pushes us to convert more and more and more of nature into product, more and more of relationship and community into services. So it's totally consistent with that, with the worship of growth and conquest. It fits right in. Also, our money system that we have today pushes people into competition with each other. It separates us. So it's totally consistent with a worldview that says who you are is a separate self in a universe of other, in competition with everybody else. In fact, that's what an economics textbook says on page 1. It'll lay out 2 assumptions. 1, human beings seek to maximize their rational self-interest. That is your fundamental motivation in economics, according to economics. 2, we live in a world of scarcity. Sometimes it sure seems that way. Both of them seem true. It sure seems like we live in a world of scarcity. Something like 1 in 5 or 1 in 7 people go hungry every night. People are starving. But is that really because of scarcity? Actually, more food is wasted than the whole planet can eat. And someone was just telling me in the UK, it's like 30-something% of all food is wasted. Supermarkets now, when they throw out their food at the end of the day, they spray it with purple dye so that people can't, dumpster dive or whatever you call it here. There's another word here for it. We call it dumpster diving. Skipping, yeah. So there's lots of food, not to mention, so there's the waste, not to mention the enormous tracts of land devoted to biofuels, to lawn grass, the abandoned farms all throughout Scotland and Spain and many other countries. We had a little radio interview before this, and someone asked me, what do you sense is the dream of the land here? And what I saw was that the land wants the people back, wants the people to be intimately related. It misses them. Not just having people there, but having people there who really know the land. Land is kind of like we are, We want and need to be intimately known, to be an intimate relationship. And the land is getting lonely because people have left it. And the ones who are there, maybe they have a big house and a big lawn, but their attention is elsewhere. And boy, if someone came in here wanting economic systems analysis, then you're probably feeling a bit disappointed. I'll get a little bit to that. And then other people really couldn't care less about Sacred Economics, the book title. Sacred alienates half the people and economics alienates the other half. Okay, so scarcity of food is artificial. There's an abundance of food. Scarcity of water, actually, is artificial as well. I made a list one time of 15 kinds of artificial scarcity that rule our planet. All artificial scarcity. Scarcity of time, scarcity of energy, scarcity of water, scarcity of love, scarcity of sex, scarcity of intimacy. I mean, here we are, all of us so capable of love and just walking separate from each other. And in workshops sometimes, we do gazing exercises or we hug each other, and it meets such a deep need just to really see somebody, really hear somebody, and to be seen and to be heard. And when you have that experience, you don't want to go shopping. And you realize, all of the artificial scarcity is accompanied by a superficial excess. So we have terrible water scarcity, growing deserts. At the same time, we have huge floods, terrible flooding. We have the scarcity of sex, love, and intimacy accompanied by enormous amounts of pornography. We have the scarcity of money for so many people, accompanied by obscene wealth in the hands of a few. We have scarcity of food all over the planet, accompanied by growing obesity. And I could go on, but the point is that the scarcity is artificial. The money system generates many, many other kinds of artificial scarcity. Even our scarcity of time is in large part due to our economy, as well as our technology and the whole way of looking at the world as time is scarce, you have to maximize efficiency and so forth. And this is something of a puzzle, Futurists, going all the way back to Descartes, predicted that technology would bring us very soon into an age of leisure. They were saying it in the 1790s, the steam engine can do the work of 1,000 men. Very soon, each man will have to work only 1,000th as hard. Well, okay, that didn't happen, but maybe it's electricity. Or maybe it's the computer, the laser, nanotechnology, this age of leisure is always just around the corner. But leisure peaked in 1973 in the industrial world. People work harder now. And even in 1973, worked way more than Stone Age hunter-gatherers, who worked about 20 hours a week on subsistence and spent huge amounts of time basically singing, dancing, I'm hitting puberty or something here. storytelling or just sitting around, I came across this when I read an ethnography by Richard Lee, who is an anthropologist studying the Kung in the Kalahari Desert, where they get like 4 inches of rain a year. So if there's anywhere where life should be a struggle to survive, it should be there. So he goes there and he's like, these people are basically doing nothing, where's the struggle to survive? So he follows them around with a notebook, logging how much time each adult spends on subsistence. And it was like 20 hours a week. And they were just never worried about the future, very nonchalant attitude. And this general finding was replicated all over the planet. So what happens here is that the reason we don't have leisure is because at every juncture, we as a society have chosen to consume more rather than to work less. And this choice is forced on us by the money system, as I will perhaps explain. So let me just give you the basic template for the artificial scarcity of money that generates so many other kinds of artificial scarcity. The money system works very much like a game of musical chairs. And I apologize to anyone who was at Falkland and heard me describe this already. So musical chairs, you set up, 19 chairs, 20 people, right? And the music starts and you dance around, the music stops, and everybody goes for a chair. One person's left out because of the setup of the game. And now suppose we play a game of musical chairs that the consequences, if you don't get the chair, the consequences is that you lose your home and your kids don't eat. Okay, so it's really important to get a chair in this game. So you look at people's behavior in this game, and the music stops, and they're all elbowing each other, pushing each other, the strong are pushing the weak, and nobody's letting each other have the chair. And if occasionally somebody does allow somebody else to take their chair, you're like, wow, that person is an angel, that person is altruistic. That's not normal behavior. That's like Jesus or somebody who's, acts in a way that's separate from human nature. But generally, everybody's elbowing and pushing and shoving, and the economist says, yup, see, that's human nature. We're competitive. Everybody's in it for themselves. A war of each against all. That's what it is. Just like nature, red in tooth and claw. Everybody's struggling to maximize their reproductive self-interest, which is, by the way, becoming an obsolete theory even in biology, as the role of symbiosis and cooperation becomes undeniable. Is that actually human nature? Or is that the aspect of human nature that is generated by the setup of the system? In other words, artificial competition and artificial scarcity. What would it be like if there were 20 people and 20 chairs, and every chair was maybe different and every person was different? And sometimes maybe people would both go for the same chair. But sometimes you'd say, well, that chair is actually better for you. And let me help you. That chair is better for me. Let me help you find the chair that's better for you. Like, what would the game be like then? It'd be a very different game. Well, the money system is very much, as I said, like a game of musical chairs because of the way money is created. Because, in other words, of the social agreement that generates this thing we call money. The way it works is that banks lend money into existence as interest-bearing debt. So I'm a bank, 100 people in the room, I lend each of you £1 million, or I'm the banking system, and you're the entire economy, and I lend each of you £1 million. And it's at 7% interest, 10-year term. You all owe me £2 million after 10 years. Not a problem. Because each one of you is a smart, hardworking, creative person. You'll pay me £2 million back because you're going to earn it from everybody else. And in fact, you're going to earn £5 million. You're going to pay me back $2 million, and you're going to be rich yourself. No problem for you. No problem for you. No problem for you. But actually, everyone, you can see the problem. Because everybody owes me 2 million, but I've only created 1 million each. So that means half of you have to go bankrupt. And to avoid that, you have to struggle and elbow and push and shove and find something to sell to each other. Desperately seek some piece of nature to convert into a product, some relationship to convert into a service. Now, in real life, it's more complicated than this. I mean, I've very, very vastly oversimplified it. But I will fill in one more detail, which is growth. In real life, after 10 years, very, very few of you go bankrupt, because by that time, I will have lent more money into existence. I'll have lent enough for everybody, more or less, to pay me back. But that new lending comes with interest as well. So now the total debt is even more. But that's okay, because when that comes due, I will have lent even more money into existence. More and more and more. The whole game works as long as it all keeps growing. And that requires what we call economic growth. That requires more and more of nature turned into products that are bought and sold. More and more relationships turned into services that are bought and sold. Because say you come to me and you say, Charles, I'd like a loan. I have a business idea. And I say, great, what's your business idea? And you say, you know, people in rural Scotland, they still cook their own haggis, and they still take care of their own children. And their children play outdoors instead of playing video games. And so I'm going to go there and I'm going to sell packaged haggis and convenience foods, because people still cook traditional foods there. I'm gonna sell convenience foods instead, and I'm gonna set up daycare centers so people don't take care of their kids anymore. Maybe I'll poison the water so that they have to buy bottled water, and I'll tell them that their traditional skills and lifestyles are obsolete, so that they purchase those things instead and go work in the economy instead of helping each other out. And I'm going to make lots of money by doing this. Let's keep it simple. I'm going to open a daycare center. Okay? And I say, great business plan. I'll lend you that money. Now suppose another one of you comes and says, Charles, what I care about is the recovery of lost traditions and lost skills. And I'm going to set up a Gaelic school in rural Scotland and a community co-op. And we're going to begin to replant the Caledonian forest that once covered the whole island, you know, but I need, you know, money to live on while I do this. So can you give me a business loan? And I'll say no. I mean, I would like to, because I'm a nice guy, but how are you going to pay me back? What goods and services are you going to create? Because a forest that's not cut down, that's not a good. It's only good when it's converted into board feet of lumber. People telling stories in front of the fireplace is not a service. It's only a service when the stories get commodified, made into movies, and sold to you. So, our money system only works. Well, first, it drives the conversion of life into money, and it only works if life is being converted into money. Because when you guys stop coming to me with those business plans, when there's no more nature left to convert into product, and no more community left to convert into services, economic growth stops. Nobody has a good business plan anymore. I can't lend anymore. Debt rises faster than the ability to pay. Wealth concentrates in fewer and fewer hands, and the system teeters toward collapse. And that's the good news that I'm giving you. Now, we can make this happen faster if we deprive the growth machine of food. If we say, yeah, you know, we're not going to let you convert the shale gas into product. And really what's the worst about that is how it destroys the water. That's the worst part of fracking. We're not going to let you convert our water into product anymore. We're not going to let you, keep building more roads and keep de-skilling society, and we're going to, in fact, reclaim some of these monetized things and learn to do them for ourselves and each other without money. And again, then you're making even less room for profitable business plans, and you're hastening the demise of the growth machine, making collapse come sooner, but also mitigating its severity, because now there's still some wealth left. There's still some forests that haven't been cut down. There's still some ecosystems that are intact. And that's why Joanna Macy says that it's important, one of the three things we have to do is to stop or slow down or protect stop or slow down the destruction and protect things that are good and beautiful. So basically, the big picture is that we are heading toward an inevitable collapse, and that this is good news because this is how change happens, whether to a society, and it's not just economic. I'm talking about money now, but there's many crises that are emerging all at the same time, and they all of the crises come from this deep story of separation, which I call the old story, the story of domination, of conquest, of competition, of scarcity, of separate selves in a universe of other. If you look carefully at our penal system, our educational system, our political system, our medical system, our agricultural system, all of these draw on the deep paradigm of human separate from nature, person separate from person, and from that comes the paradigm of control. There's this other out there, hostile forces or indifferent forces, impersonal forces. So well-being comes through controlling all of those, and that's kind of what technology is, and imposing our design onto nature, because nature couldn't have its own purpose or intelligence. It's just our kind of playground. And that's not to say that there's an intelligent designer outside of nature. That is actually a capitulation to this worldview that says, yeah, you're right. Matter in and of itself does not possess sacredness, intelligence, purpose, desire, selfhood. It's outside. So it's okay to treat nature as just a bunch of stuff. I was going to say a bunch of crap, but that would be insulting to crap, which is actually the sacred substance that we cannot have a sustainable society if we don't honor it and recirculate it instead of dumping it into the ocean. So, yeah. Yeah, where was I?
So would you like maybe any points to that?
Well, I mean, I could. I was. What I was going to do is kind of say one or two, ways in which we could have a money system built on a new story. But if maybe you've been sitting and listening too long, and more, a little more, yeah. Okay, so the big picture is multiple crises converging together to birth us into a new story. And it's a process of crisis followed by collapse, followed by an empty space, a mystery space, an unknowing space, followed by the birth of something new that is invited into the empty space. And this is a very, very universal template for big transformation. Like, I don't think I go through any big transformations in my life unless there's some kind of crisis and a breakdown, and then a time where I don't even know who I am anymore, and I don't know what's real anymore. And you can see that this is getting close for our society. There's kind of this feeling of unreality now that's growing, and bewilderment, and maybe clinging all the more tightly to the old certainties, to the old world, which is kind of a desperation that shows that the game's almost up. So the empty space and then the birth of something new. That's the template that I think applies both to individuals and to civilizations, and that's what we're heading toward. So, and I think that we can see what the new story is already. Maybe we all catch a glimpse of it in a different way. we probably all have had momentary, at least momentary, experiences of maybe interacting with people in a way that wasn't based on competition, where everybody was doing exactly what was needed at the moment. And there was kind of, as if there was some invisible coordinating power that guides everybody to give the right gift at the right time. You know, maybe you've experienced something like that, or had a moment where you experience what true intimacy is and how close it is, or you experience the intelligence of nature, or the intelligence of the body, and you have a glimpse of what's possible for ourselves and for our planet. So we catch these glimpses. And the way that I articulate the new story is that it's a story of interbeing. Interconnection, interdependency, but even more than that, interbeing. Not a separate self with relationships, but a self that is relationship. Which means that you're not really separate. If you are relationship, then anything that happens to what you're related to is happening to you as well. And that's something that we can feel when we look at this planet and feel the pain of what's happening. Not because of a rational calculation that the floods in Bangladesh are going to affect my self-interest, or the typhoon in the Philippines. It's not a rational calculation. It hurts because it's happening to us. Because we are not separate. What would a system look like built on that? Non-separation. From each other, from all people, from all beings. So that's what I describe in the book. And I'll just give you one or two little pieces of it. Wondering which pieces to give. There's pretty much 7 pillars of it. Internalization of external costs, so that you can't profit by polluting and stealing from future generations. Products that do that become very expensive. Universal basic income, which gives value. Basically, it's a salary everybody gets just for being alive. Your share of the accumulated cultural wealth of countless generations. That says that a lot of what we need to do today can't be measured and can't be monetized, and we trust you as somebody who cares, as somebody with a gift to do the things that need to be done, even if you're not motivated by money. Economists say that this would be a disaster. They say, if you didn't have to work, if you weren't induced to work with money, then no one would work. You'd sit around on your couch, eating crisps, playing World of Warcraft, watching soaps. That's what you do. Why? Because I know you. You're a ruthless maximizer of self-interest. That's what you are. But what if that's not what you are? What if what you are is a gift bearer, born into gratitude, with an irrepressible desire to do something beautiful with your life? A desire that can be suppressed and temporarily bribed away if you're scared enough of losing your benefits, losing your retirement, being unsafe, insecure, and bribed with trivial rewards that are substitutes for what we really need. Like I said, when you have that experience of intimacy, you don't want to go shopping. We go to war against greed and consumerism, but these are just symptoms. They're symptoms of something missing. The person who overconsumes, overeats, gets the big house, the multiple sports cars, and all those things, that's a hungry person. And what the person really needs is intimacy, connection, play, adventure, the experience of knowing and being known, the experience of contributing to something beautiful. That's what that person needs. And if they don't get that, how much of the ugly can compensate for a lack of the beautiful? You need an infinite amount. That's why people have an infinite lust for money. I have a different view of human nature. Not ruthless maximizers of self-interest, but beings of gift, of divine creativity. So maybe the University of Oslo is right to exclude me. Because what I'm saying conflicts in a very fundamental way with basic precepts of science and kind of conventional epistemology, or even conventional ontology. Anyway, if we are beings of gift, and you may notice this, you may have like really beautiful desires that you want to do something in this world, and why do you not do them? It's because there's no money in it, because there's no support for it. Money, quite the contrary to making us contribute, money stops us from contributing in many, many meaningful ways. So universal basic income is part of the vision. And there's other things, gift economy, shift of taxation onto economic rent, resource extraction, and so forth. I'm not going to explain all of them. Another big one is to reverse the flow of interest, to create money with negative interest rather than through interest-bearing debt. And this, I think I won't go into detail now. It takes like 10 or 15 minutes to really explain that one. Maybe I'll let that come up in Q&A if there's a strong interest in it. I have a long chapter in the book, and the book is online, by the way. Maybe I will mention one more thing. That's all systems level stuff, but I also write about the personal level stuff. If it is our nature to be beings of the gift, then by trusting ourselves, trusting our desire, trusting what the choice that makes us feel most alive will be guided toward contributing to what's really needed. The gift is called by the need. So part of the old story is a war against the self, to conquer oneself just as we conquer nature, to conquer desire, to conquer pleasure, to rise above the flesh, to conquer selfishness, to conquer greed. But if our nature is if we have a fundamental goodness in our nature, a fundamental desire to express our gifts, then we need to do the opposite. We need to stop suppressing ourselves, stop conquering the wild within, and trust it instead. What happens then? So, really the operating paradigm of the book is the gift. I do events by the gift even. Maybe I should mention something about that. When you bought your ticket, you can choose any amount to pay, which is like kind of, it's not ideal because usually in the gift culture, you decide what the return gift will be, if any, after you've received the gift. So you had to pay before you came here, but maybe you've discovered that the amount you gave was too much or too little, inappropriate in some way. So I'll just, while I'm remembering it, I'll say you have the chance to self-adjust. We'll have a table out there with a box. The box will have money in it. Because there were some comments online, this should be a free event. So, but we had to have a minimum of £1 in the system. So if you feel that you gave too much money for an event like this, you can take some back. And if you feel like you underpaid and it was your expression of value and gratitude is more than that, then you can add some. Or you can just not worry about it. We don't have to make a court case about it. But anyway, there's that opportunity. And so we're kind of alienated from gift culture and boy, I'm really feeling conscious of going on too long now, but I'll just say one more piece. Because gift, so one of the 7 pillars of the book is gift culture and gift cosmology, gift perceptions, and how that aligns with the new story. So in the old story of separation, more for you is less for me, because we're separate individuals in an external objective universe. And we're each in it for ourselves. More for you is less for me. Your good fortune is not my good fortune. You become a more effective competitor. That's bad for me. But if we're both going for the same elk or the same job and you suffer a mishap, that's good for me. In a gift society, it's not like that. In a gift society, and this is one reason why hunter-gatherer societies were so rich and had that feeling, of wealth, of ease. In a gift society, it's the opposite. If you have more than you need, you give it to somebody else who is in need. Why would you keep stuff that you don't need? Like, that's dumb. Like, especially, it's especially dumb when you know that if you're in need, somebody's going to give to you. So there's a kind of security that doesn't depend on possession. It doesn't depend on control. In fact, in those societies, security comes from generosity. The more you give, say, even in a traditional Scottish village, if you're always helping your neighbors all the time and being really generous, then when you suffer a mishap, when your house burns down, everybody's going to come and help you rebuild your house. People will take care of you too. Which means that in a gift society, your good fortune is my good fortune as well, because you'll have more to give. Your bad fortune is my bad fortune as well. And whatever I give enriches me, because now you'll want to take care of me and you'll be better able to do it. A hunter-gatherer was interviewed by an anthropologist, and anthropologist said, why do you not ever store meat when you kill a large animal? You could dry it and store it, and you could have meat every day for a month, but instead you call a big feast and invite people from miles around, and the whole animal is consumed in one night. Why don't you store meat? And the hunter said, I do store meat. I store meat in the belly of my brother. So when we're immersed in a gift economy, these kind of spiritual teachings all of a sudden reflect economic reality. The spiritual teaching says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I know that's really hard because, in economic reality, you do unto others and no one's going to pay you to do that. But in a gift society, economic reality reflects. You have to tweak it a little. And I think this is the original meaning of the saying. As you do unto others, so you do unto yourself. The spiritual teaching of non-separation is totally in alignment with gift culture. And in fact, gift culture is the natural expression of the awakening of consciousness that we're going through. So I guess what I'm doing is I'm linking different levels, linking inside and outside, spiritual and material, systems and personal. Because like I said, I don't think that this change is going to be, this transition can happen on just one level. I think that it's happening on every level. And each of us has different gifts and are called to contribute in different ways. Some people work on the political level, the community level, the social level. Even if your work, though, is just with a single person, a baby maybe, or an old person, you are equally contributing to the change in our stories and to the world built on top of them. In the old world, the small invisible things that, for example, mothers do, don't have much of an impact. Our linear understanding of force-based cause and effect says they can't have much of an impact. Only if you do a big thing will it change the world. You know, there was a scene in the Titanic, the movie, where the ship's going down, and there's, in the fourth class cabins, there's a mother and two kids. And she knows it's going down, and there's no possible way for them to escape. So she says to the kids, "It's okay, darlings." And she reads them a book. And I never forgot that, because that's one of those things that is senseless. Senseless according to what we've been taught about how the universe works. But on another level, we know better. We know that those acts are what really change this cosmos, that they ripple out in ways we can't understand. So I want to validate people whose gifts operate on that level too. And validate, and I could talk about morphic fields and how those invisible acts create a template for that to happen everywhere. But I just want to validate that feeling that you have that, yeah, this is important right now to do. And that from the God's eye perspective, those choices, the invisible choice of being patient with your kids when no one's even going to appreciate it, and you just want to shout at them, you know, and you remember not to do it, and it's really important at that moment. Like that is, and at that moment, you know that that is just as important as anything Barack Obama could decide. It has just as big an effect on the universe. I mean, do we really live in a hierarchical universe, you know, where the men usually on top are the ones who are really changing things, and the humble at the bottom are inconsequential? Is that really the way the universe works? I don't think so. And I think we need to begin to embrace the gifts that operate on every level. And maybe that's kind of my concluding remark. So now, belatedly, and I apologize for this, but now let's just have some questions. Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what you mean by saying that there is intelligence in nature and landscape.
Yeah.
I don't quite get that concept.
Yeah. Let's see. Let me think of a good example. Okay, so in the old paradigm, order or organization would only happen if an intelligent designer created that order or organization, had a plan, you know, and created and you know, implemented a design. But what the science that's called complexity theory or nonlinear dynamics is discovering, is that order, pattern, and organization emerge spontaneously in almost any nonlinear system that meets very basic characteristics, that has, you know, very basic characteristics. So, I mean, any living system, you know, is exquisitely ordered. So that it's not a really specific example, but I could also reach into. I mean, I wish now I had like a projector and I could show you a thing that I do. So it is teleological thinking that says that there's something, even if you go to a piece of land and you say, okay, there's a place that this land wants to go. So there's something that wants to happen here. There's something and this thing, I can contribute to it. Like this, what wants to happen includes human beings, maybe, or includes me.
It's rather be on its own, and not have us crawling all over it.
Well, That's not how indigenous people understood it. They understood that every species has a gift to give toward the well-being and development of the whole, and human beings are not an exception to that. And I think what's happened is that, we've been kind of in the childhood of our species, and we haven't really discovered what the purpose of our gift is. All we see is the damage that it does, our gift of technology, for example. And so many people think, well, we're kind of nature's mistake, and nature would be better off if we just didn't participate in it at all and went extinct. I mean, there are people who believe that. But I don't think that we're nature's mistake. I just think that we have not stepped into our maturity yet. But there are, I'm thinking, for example, of Tamara Eco Village, where I visited. And they're doing a lot of very interesting work on many levels. But one thing they do is they call it a healing biotope, where they dig lakes and ponds for water retention. And there's so you're driving through Portugal on your way there, and it's dry, dusty landscape everywhere, drought conditions. Then you get to Tamara, and it's all green, and there are these ponds and lakes. And it's not because they've pumped up groundwater. It's because they've shaped the land so that water accumulates and actually replenishes the aquifers instead of running off to the sea. And you think, okay, is this just another imposition on the land? But the way that they decided where to build these ponds is they spent months and years sitting with the land until they had a sense of where the water wanted to be. So it's a different mentality. And another example, I met an Iranian man whose grandfather was a Sufi architect. And he said the way that the Sufi architects built temples, built mosques and other buildings. My grandfather, he was one of the architects of this mosque, and first they would go to the site and just sit there for days, weeks, or even months until they saw the building that wanted to be there. They saw the building, and then they would build it. So they were in service of something larger than themselves, rather than the imposers of something onto a dead, purposeless reality. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you said about morphic fields and gift acts creating a kind of template for those acts happening in the future? That's really interesting.
Right. So in the old story, change happens when you exert a force on a mass. Therefore, the amount of change that you can create depends on how much force you have at your disposal. And the force can be physical force, it could be financial force, I'm going to pay you to do things, it could be media force. But you have to make things happen, right? You have to make it happen. And that's quite natural also to make it happen if you don't think that nature has its own purpose that wants to unfold. So, there's two things to go into, but for the morphic fields part, I could also go into kind of synchronicities and stuff. So morphic resonance is a theory articulated by Rupert Sheldrake, and it says that there's another way that change happens that's more fundamental. It's that when something begins happening in one place, it creates kind of a field of change that makes it easier to happen somewhere else. The example he gives, or one example he gives, is the crystallization of certain sugar alcohols, like xylitol, that chemists wanted to make it crystallize, and they tried and tried and tried for decades, and nothing worked. And then finally, one lab somewhere, in New Zealand or something, got xylitol to crystallize. And very shortly thereafter, labs all over the world had no problem whatsoever making it crystallize. It was as if that field of xylitol crystallizing was established, and therefore it can happen easily somewhere else. Now, Sheldrake says that there's a non-material influence that's making that happen. And the kind of conventional theory is that, well, there must have been some crystal, seed crystal, that traveled from one lab to another, maybe on the beard of the researcher or something like that. Right, and like there's a mechanistic explanation for why this happened. A bit far-fetched, but you can't prove it either way. And Sheldrake says, if that were the case, it would invalidate my theory. But I disagree with Sheldrake. I think that the means by which morphic fields propagate could be anything. It could be a force of physics that we recognize, or it could be one that we don't recognize, that we don't know about. But the basic principle is that what happens in one place creates a field of change that makes it easier to happen everywhere. So if you're, say, confronted with a situation that usually in this world ends up in violence, and you change that in that place at that moment, then it makes it easier for people everywhere to respond to similar situations in the same new way. Yeah. Yeah, in the back.
I'm interested that you've mentioned the word permaculture a few times. It's an area that I'm really interested in. I think one area that permaculture struggles with is actually like monetarising how much you can grow within an acre. So
Yeah.
I know that the Permaculture Society of the UK is currently doing a questionnaire, basically trying to gather data to, in effect, put a value on how much you can grow within an acre using permaculture techniques. So I'm just interested in sort of what's your thoughts about the convergence of monetarising effectively a movement that is about sort of, its principles are based on almost like a gift sort of society, but you also talk about an impending sort of crisis that we're going to hit. But actually, does it make sense to, in the meantime, sort of monetarise things, say, on a mass scale? We can say, well, you understand in agriculture, maybe we can transition a lot quicker by monetarising something like permaculture.
Right.
Just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, there's a problem there. Okay, so first I have seen anecdotal evidence that permaculture can outproduce conventional agriculture. There's one guy in California who I actually mentioned in an article one time who fed several hundred people on 3 or 4 acres. And his yields were 8 times higher than the United States Department of Agriculture said were possible. Not 8 times higher than the average, 8 times higher than the theoretical maximum. And so you get stories like this from Findhorn as well. Impossible feats of agriculture happening because they're supplicating the nature devas or something like that.
Yay!
I don't always mention nature devas because, I don't want people to have to buy into nature devas to also buy into universal basic income or something like that. But here I am, torpedoing my credibility. Anyway, but whether it's nature devas or just really, generally accepted permaculture techniques, there's a temptation to prove that permaculture could feed the world, or that it could outproduce conventional agriculture, or even be financially viable. But once you start doing that and trying to apply those techniques toward the goal of maximizing production or maximizing money, then you've already violated a basic permaculture principle, which is that permaculture, and I guess you could frame it in terms of a gift, but it's something you do for the good of the land and the human beings that live around the land. It probably usually isn't for the good for that extended ecological community to maximize financial production, right? Now, I could see circumstances in which it is for the good of the community to have very, very, very high yields. You know, if there's like a major breakdown in our chemical agriculture system and people are hungry, you know, then yeah, you could have enormous yields. Typically, it requires a lot of labor. Our current system is very, very efficient in producing high yields per unit of labor, but it's actually not that efficient in producing high yields per unit of land. Permaculture and I mean, traditional Chinese agriculture, for example, like whole clans would live on farms that were like 3 or 4 acres. And the way they did it is they had unlimited labor. You know, if you could increase yields by 10% by doubling the labor input, you'd do it because you had lots of kids and relatives. And so I mean, I could see circumstances where permaculture would go in that direction. But today, that's not an issue. So I think there's a fundamental problem in translating permaculture into the metrics that convince policymakers. Yeah.
Okay, just to apologize, I'm a bit of a systems person,
Yeah.
so maybe I can just ask the question to get a better idea of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I'm focused specifically, you spoke about internalizing externalities.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of guessing in your kind of post-crisis, where you're not really going to go for the traditional tax subsidies or market-based programs. What is it you kind of see happening in terms of that? What instruments are in place to do with it?
I actually missed a little bit of that because the door was opening.
Okay. What did you hear?
The part where I'm probably not talking about the something subsidy something.
Yeah, I was just saying that the traditional approach to internalizing externalities is kind of the Govian taxes subsidies,
Yeah.
kind of cozy and market-based approaches. I was wondering what your alternative is that you're kind of picturing.
Yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings about Govian taxes, which means basically like green taxes, taxes on pollution, and stuff like that. I think that there's a role for things like that, especially when it's a resource that a certain level of use is okay, and beyond that is damaging. But for like ecocidal activities, we need laws and not just economic incentives to say we're just not going to do that. There's a problem in putting a finite value on something sacred. You know, so. But an example of something that I think would be a good idea is, say, you know, there's an aquifer, and we know that it gets replenished at a certain rate. So maybe 1 billion gallons a year could be drawn from the aquifer. Then you could have some fee-based system or some market-based system to allocate those 1 billion gallons. I think that if it comes to, say, producing nuclear waste or something like that, the market-based incentives to make that really, really expensive are dangerous because, you know, once it gets produced, like there it is, you know, and if someone can't pay, that doesn't mean it disappears. You know, if someone can't pay the storage costs or something like that. So, but you know, for something like I think even CO2 production could be subjected to a fee and dividend system. Not the way it's done now, not with offsets, and the system that has pretty much failed already, where you can, you know, where the carbon cowboys go to South America and they say, boy, if only this land were clear cut, you could plant a forest here and get carbon credits for it. Hint, hint. You know, and then, boy, the land gets clear cut. And then so there's all kinds of abuses that happen. But I think, in principle, we have to somehow align money to what is important and what we want to create as a society. So, you know, for some things, like sulfur dioxide, it works pretty well to have a tax or a fee or a quota, an auction system. Is that enough of an answer? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm interested what you were saying about we have to change within, and I'm quite interested in Buddhist ideas of that basically we're compassionate beings at heart. And I was wondering if in terms of examples of alternative economies, do you know much about the Bhutan and the gross domestic happiness?
Yeah. I do. I actually went to Bhutan last year, earlier this year. It's definitely not, a utopia. They have a very strong, people really believe and celebrate the idea of gross national happiness, but at the same time they're subject to the pressures of the global financial system to commoditize, and so they are developing in some ways, but also resisting development in other ways. The idea behind gross national happiness, it's a good idea as far as it goes. It says that gross domestic product is a very poor measure of well-being. And it's the measure we usually use. If a country's growing its GDP, that's economic growth. We say that country's doing really well, even if that means people giving up traditional agriculture and self-sufficiency in order to work on plantations and buy imported food. That raises GDP. Anytime you disrupt collaborative sharing economies and replace them with consumer economies, GDP goes up. Not to mention, building prisons, toxic waste dumps, all that raises GDP too. So the idea is, okay, let's measure well-being in a different way. Let's include in our measure ecological health, longevity, educational attainment, leisure, marital stability, or whatever. Let's include other things in our measure. So it's a good idea as far as it goes, but there is the problem that it's still the mindset of creating a better world by maximizing a number. And it assumes that the good can be measured. And that actually, that's Jeremy Bentham was the one who developed this idea that someday we'll be able to measure happiness, and the goal of government will be to maximize the greatest good for the greatest number. And it'll be an engineering problem just like anything else. And I think that part of the problem is this whole engineering mindset, the whole mindset that we can engineer a better world. I mean, that's part of the whole imposing design kind of thing. And the idea that our destiny is to perfect the measurement of all things, that all things can be quantified. When you quantify something, you reduce it. And something's always lost when you quantify it. When you reduce it to number, there's a part that's gone. And that part is what we're hungry for today. So we have more calories than ever before, but we're less nourished because the immeasurable part of food, you go to the supermarket, and the food doesn't taste as good. And you forget what food is supposed to taste like until you go to Mexico and have a fresh ground tortilla. And you're like, whoa, that's what corn is supposed to taste like. Or you have an apple still warm from the tree. Or even eating food cooked by your mother has a certain something that no other food has. So we have this increasing excess in the West, in the rich countries, of everything quantifiable, but a poverty of that which cannot be measured. So we have more music than ever before at the touch of a button, but we lack the experience of being serenaded by a lover or of getting together with people and singing together. Maybe in Scotland you still have that in the pubs. We used to have it in our pubs too, but not anymore. Now there's really loud music blaring and TV's blaring all the time. So do we have less music than before? No, we have more music. More kilobytes of music, more seconds of music. But we have less of this immeasurable thing. And I think that part of our hunger for consumption comes because we're trying to use more and more of the quantifiable to meet the need for the qualitative, more and more of the finite to meet the need for the infinite, more and more of the measurable to meet the need for the sacred. So I think like gross national happiness is, I mean, I guess it's a positive step, but there's something else that we need to look at. Yeah.
Could you elaborate a bit more on the interest you were talking about, the reverse interest?
Yeah.
And I guess just other kind of systematic ways for the future economy.
Yeah. So it's been implemented before. The famous case was in Vorgel, Austria during the Great Depression, when the government was out of money, the local government, so they issued their own local money that had kind of a decay rate built into it. You had to put a stamp on it. If it was a 100 shilling note, maybe you had to put a 1 shilling stamp on it every month to keep it valid. So if you hung on to it for a year, at the end of the year, it would only be worth 88 shillings because you have to put 12 stamps on it for it to be valid. So people had an incentive to spend it right away, to pay their taxes early, to not hoard the money. So it circulated very fast, and the economy experienced a miracle there, and people from all over the world came to learn from the Vorgel miracle, including from the United States. And then the government shut it down, and in the States, President Roosevelt declared all such currencies illegal and introduced a centralized solution instead. So today, the implementation would be a liquidity tax on bank reserves. So if I'm a bank and say I have £1 billion of reserves in the central bank, today I can just keep that money there. Or I can invest it in gilts, in government bonds that are basically risk-free and get positive rate of interest. And if I'm a big enough institution, if I control enough money, I can beat inflation. So today you can get richer by merely having a lot, which is the opposite of how it was in gift cultures, where wealth was kind of a burden. A nomadic person, you didn't want to carry around lots of wealth. Even a farmer, if he had a storehouse full of grain, the grain would go bad. Therefore, it made sense to share. If I have, say I have, a storehouse of grain, and none of you guys do, I'm the rich guy, and say I'm a selfish bastard and I want to stay rich, do I just hold on to that grain? I'd be better off giving everybody a bushel of grain and say, when I'm in need of a bushel of grain, you give me a bushel of fresh grain. That's a zero interest loan. But money is not like that, because money doesn't go bad like grain does. So say I'm a bank, I have £1 billion in the central bank, and I know that it's going to, there's a fee on that central bank deposit. So in a year, it'll only be worth £950 million. It's to my advantage to lend it out at zero interest now, which means that that you people don't have to come to me with a business plan that's going to create even more money, which means that the economy works without growth, that money circulates without growth. And it means that you cannot get richer and richer by merely owning a lot of money. It also reverses what you call the discounting of future cash flows. So suppose you own a forest and you have a choice. Either you can clear cut the forest and build a toxic waste dump there and ruin the land forever, and you can make £1 billion, cut and dry, quick profit. Or you can log it sustainably and make £10 million a year forever. what would you do? £1 billion now, or 10 million a year forever? What would you like to do?
Second.
Yeah, you would like to do the second, but you can't. Because if you do the first, you get that £1 billion, you invest it at interest in German bonds or something, and you get 30 million a year instead of 10 million. Well, you say, I'm the CEO, I can do whatever the hell I please. I can make 10 million instead of 30 million, it's fine. Well, that's fine, except A, you're not serving the fiduciary responsibility to the corporation that seeks to maximize shareholder value. And B, even if you can get away with that, the corporate rater is going to say, your company is undervalued because you have an underperforming asset, i.e. that forest, which is only making you 10 million pounds a year, but it could be making you 30 million pounds a year. Therefore, your stock price is undervalued because it's based on a lower revenue stream. So I'm going to buy your company, cut down that forest, raise the revenue stream by 20 million pounds, and sell the company again at a higher stock value. So the only way to prevent that from happening, and this is based on a true story actually, the only way to prevent that from happening is to preemptively cut down that forest, preemptively raising the stock price of the corporate raiders and have a profit margin. Say you own a planet. Say you're the president of the world with dictatorial powers, and aliens come to you, and they say, we'd like to make you an offer for the planet. Right now, sustainable gross world product is maybe $80 trillion. Well, we're going to offer you $1 quadrillion. 10 quadrillion dollars. Cold cash. And we'll buy the planet from you, we'll siphon off the oceans, we'll strip out the core, we'll destroy the planet, but think of how rich you'll be. The interest on that $10 quadrillion is much, much more than gross world product. Are you going to take that deal? Sound good? Guess what, though? We are taking that deal. Right now, we're liquidating the planet for a short-term profit. And that is driven by our money system. And that's why I think it's so important to change the way that money is created. It's also in line with Buddhist principles. You could say that the problem comes from money which is not impermanent, or so it seems. It seems that if you have enough of it, you'll live forever, because it stays there. It doesn't decay like everything else in the universe. It just grows with time. But everything else in the universe decays and returns to its source. It's impermanent. So we're attaching an impermanent, cyclical world to a permanent or even exponentially growing thing called money. So more and more of the world gets attached to the money, and there's less and less of the world left. That's another way to look at it.
Well, it's 8:30.
Oh, okay.
It's 8:30, so we've got 15 more minutes in my program, an idea. So it's particularly new ideas or things that have been bothering you that maybe Charles hasn't touched on yet, and then we'll start moving towards winding up.
What thoughts do you have in collective consciousness?
What thoughts do I have in collective consciousness? About collective consciousness or in collective consciousness?
Up to you.
Geez, I mean, I think.
Talk to me as if I'm a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old or 8-year-old.
All right.
See me as being part of the collective consciousness.
Yeah. I would say to the 5-year-old or 8-year-old that your secret knowledge is true. That people are not supposed to hate Monday. That school is practice for life, therefore it's not supposed to suck. That your secret knowledge that you're here for a magnificent purpose is true. That your understanding of the world as alive and magical is true. That on your own, it's almost impossible to remember this, but that you'll have help. Because more and more people, even grown-ups, are remembering. This is a transition that we cannot do alone. It's not like some guru gets it first and brings everybody else into it. It's a place where we hold each other. When your knowing is strong, you can hold it for somebody else. You may doubt it right now, but I know for you that you are here with a magnificent gift, and I can see it. And then when my knowing is weak and yours is strong, you can do the same for me. Enlightenment is a group project, in other words. And I think a lot of us have gone through a lonely journey, secretly knowing all of these things that I would tell the 8-year-old. But a million voices deny it. And the money system denies it. And the media denies it. And so I, spent many years thinking maybe I'm just crazy, Maybe I'm just not well adjusted. Maybe I'm too lazy. Maybe that's why I'm not a success. Why isn't my heart in this? Must be something wrong with me. And many people have been on this lonely journey. But today, more and more of us are looking at each other, looking at me and saying, yeah, you're not crazy. I see what you see. I see a wrongness in the world so deep that it includes almost everything. And I see the possibility of something really beautiful that it's up to us to do. That we have the power to do it. Individually. You have the power to do that. Everybody has the power. I see other people reflecting that back at me, saying, yes, Charles, your secret knowledge is right. Every act, every invisible choice has cosmic significance. So now the time of loneliness is coming to an end. It's coming to an end as the new story gains critical mass. And we hold each other in that place.
I'm quite interested in traditional knowledge and indigenous peoples. I was in an internship over the summer which dealt with conservation and rural development, and it was within a hunter-gatherer society. And I found that a lot of the younger generation are making the shift that we have already made a few hundred years ago towards viewing materialism as the goal. And so what we're aiming towards is already in existence but being lost.
Yeah.
How can we stop that from happening? On a sort of preventative rather than solution.
I can tell you on the systems level, again, among other things, it's the financial system that drives that. But it's also other colonial mindsets that go into a place like that and take away, destroy the worldview or the story that they once inhabited. Even if you bring a school in there. Lots of well-meaning people want to bring schools to the poor, illiterate savages, who don't even have schools for their children. But you bring a school in there, and their whole cosmology begins to fall apart because they're getting knowledge imported from somewhere else and ways of knowing imported from somewhere else. So their identity begins to dissolve. When you bring in, outside commercial goods and commodities, their reciprocal systems fall apart. When you bring in even like hospitals, their old medicine, which was deeply embedded in their worldview, becomes inoperative. So in lots and lots of ways, so what happens is you tear apart their identity, which leaves a void, which gets filled by material things and imported identities. So that's kind of the dynamic that happens. So how to stop it? I mean, there's organizations that do that kind of work. Survival International, for example, is one of the ones I like. You have to, preserve their land. You have to stop people from going in and exploiting them. It's nothing mysterious. What needs to be done? But there is also, this gets into a lot of complicated issues. Some people say, well, Charles, it's colonialist to tell them not to develop. What if they want to develop? What if they want cell phones and they want cars and they want all this stuff? And I would say, well, what's the context of their wanting? Have we created conditions in which they want those things? Like, even like the kind of media that gets projected or carried into traditional societies. So yeah, I don't think there's a simple answer to that.
I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting
Yeah.
It just seems like we do a lot of talks towards something like this in a situation like here, but not much happens in a place where it's already existing.
I mean, I think we have much more to learn from those people who still have a living memory of other ways of knowing than we have to teach them. As our systems break down and the center dissolves, things from the margins can come in and bring new life. I think that our salvation will come from the margins. Marginalized people, marginalized parts of ourselves, marginalized technologies, marginalized healing technologies, agricultural technologies, marginalized races, marginalized people in our society. Let's see.
Going back a bit to the change from within, all these sort of ideas really resonate, and I really wish to embody them. And then I can hit a very deep vein of this sense of scarcity and lack. And I know that some of the stuff I was at the workshop yesterday, some of the stuff there helped with maybe how one can help move that or challenge that or change it. I'm wondering if you've got any other suggestions or techniques you can share with us. Just to sort of, like that wish for something different and the wish that I can act differently, and then there's this terror about, because I'm being fed so much, there's this lack and this scarcity, and it feels so deeply in the cells as well.
Yeah. So one of our habits is, I call it the war on evil. And it has a political dimension. It's related to the worldview of force. It's carried to us by every action movie that says the problem is a bad guy, and the solution is to destroy the bad guy. U.S. foreign policy is based on that. Goodness comes through control, and then we apply it to ourselves. So in this case, you've heard stories about what opens up for people when they let go of compulsive security and open up to the gift. You hear these stories and you're like, I want that too. I want to be free of scarcity thinking. I want to live in the gift. I want to live in generosity. I want that magic. But then you recognize very honestly, but I'm terrified to do that. Well, part of the old story would be to confront that terror as an enemy and seek to conquer it somehow. Perhaps through some stupendous act of will. Perhaps by motivating yourself with emotionally force-based technologies such as shame and guilt and conditional self-approval. And why am I so cowardly, and if I could be like that generous person, then I would be such a good person and I would get to like myself. And this is all the machinery of control applied to the self, mirroring the domination of nature. So there's another way, and the other way would be first to hold that fear in your attention. Just give it attention, because the fear comes from something that hurts. It comes from the wound of separation, which is almost universal in our culture. Which is one reason why it hurts just to exist in our culture. Ancient cultures did not have a word for boredom. They did not have an experience for boredom. Having nothing to occupy you or entertain you was blissful. They would sit and watch the grass grow, literally. But when we don't have something to fill up the emptiness, it hurts, because we're born into this wound, or grow up with this wound of separation. So healing comes through giving attention to that wound, loving attention for one thing. And then secondly, to practice the unconditional love of self would be to say maybe, okay, I accept my need for security until such time as I find I no longer need it. In fact, maybe this secure job is a gift to myself. And by doing, and I will trust the call of life toward my next step, even if it's a tiny step. When you make that decision and say, I'm ready for my next step into the gift, then usually something will present itself that's at the edge of your courage, but not beyond the edge of your courage. It's expansive, but it's not heroic. And then you'll take that step, you expand, and then the edge of your courage will expand as well. So it doesn't have to be like this heroic struggle where you do this, this hard thing. That's another version of the conquest of nature, What if it's easy? What if there's a natural rhythm to our expansion that we can trust? And you can feel that this is kind of a more feminine way of looking at things. Not breaking through, and moving past obstacles, and right? There's a place for that in the universe too. But I think in our society that, is kind of overemphasized. And we need much more of the feminine energy during this phase of our evolution. And so part of that is to offer the self gentle, affirming nurturance and patience, and to allow space for that next step to happen. And I guess maybe I should wrap it up, right?
What I will do is I'll make a few remarks, and then if there's any last final thing that anybody wants to throw out to you, and any last reflection from you,
Okay, so I get one last reflection after this? All right. Okay, let's do that then. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Whose head's spinning then? I've got three things I just want to touch on. Charles has written and was speaking in many respects about this book, Sacred Economics. On Saturday evening, I went up to Word Power Books on West Cross Causeway side, and I'm going to have it in my hand on Tuesday. They'll order it for you. You don't have to go to Amazon. There's another book he's written.
The more beautiful, the Ascent of Humanity?
Ascent of Humanity.
Yeah, that's...
Which you might be interested to look at. Charles, just Googling his name, you'll see he has his own website and lots of links and links. So, but sometimes it is easier, and obviously he's very generously put his book online, but sometimes it's easier to get a book. And this third book, which you call...
The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible.
Word Power has ordered a couple of copies already. That's going to be published in December. But you could place your own order, and then they'll phone you up and tell you when it's coming. Because sometimes a book can be shareable, and it can be something which we can treasure and so on. So I think that that's something for you to consider and to think of going to Word Power Books in West Cross Causeway. You can phone them or order online, any which way you like. The other is that when we came to the end of Saturday's workshop, there was that hunger for kind of thinking about more. There was a recognition that there's a locality issue here. And that people came from Dublin, all over the place to the workshop yesterday. It's real privilege. But that we might have some possible follow-up to this work. And there might be an announce list, which would be very, very rarely used, but if you wish. And Tracy has suggested that the two email lists that she's effectively got from those of you who booked formally online, we will send one email out inviting you, we haven't quite worked out what, but to do something to be able to sign up to that. Some of you have come just on spec, which is great, and I always recommend that, and that's why we've got such a bloody full room. And that means your email address won't be captured. And so I'm wondering if somebody's got a big A4 sheet and can put it next to the bowl, the giving and taking out bowl, on the table on the way out, so that you can, if you want, get that one email and make sure that you have an opportunity to follow up if you want. And that's because Charles has challenged us to re-envisage our lives as gift bearers. And it's something that isn't very easy to do on our own, and so we maybe be doing it together. Now that's the last of my formal bit of chair, but I think it's nice for Charles, in this just that calm bit now, while you think what you want to share with us last, I invite you to wrap up.
Yeah. Sometimes people ask me why I'm optimistic, knowing full well the crisis that this planet faces, and that things are worse than most people even know about. How can I still be optimistic? One reason is because this is how big change happens. It's normal. Birth, death, They all follow the same pattern, transformation, coming of age. Another reason, though, is that I have these moments where I see just the beauty and the creative power in human beings. It's not just an ideology, an idea that we're beings of the gift. I run into extraordinary people sometimes doing unusual things. And it's easy to see them as powerful carriers of gift. But lately I'm also getting just these moments where I'm seeing it in everybody. Where I'm seeing like the invisible paths that people have walked. Some people are born into such trauma and pain and separation that even if their only accomplishment is to pass on a little less of that pain to the next generation, they've done something huge. Something no more, no less important than anything Gandhi achieved. I see people in this room who've walked a path like that. And I want you to know that your heroism and healing is visible. And that it's having an effect on the universe. And I thank you for that. My new book is dedicated to the humble, because they're the ones who are really changing the world. And I feel really honored to be in front of you all and to tell this story. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Has come all the way from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He's visited Norway, he's visited Finland on this visit, and this is the first time he's come to Scotland. It doesn't come without costs, so think carefully when you're weighing up what value this has been for you this evening. Some of us who signed up on the first day that Tracy put it up chipped in a £6. You choose
Really trust what feels right to you. You know, if that, for some reason you can't explain, $0 feels right to you, really trust that. I'll be fine. Yeah, don't let the guilt thing operate. Really trust it.
Thank you. And of course, thank you all for coming.
Yeah, very. That's very. Okay.